Camera operators behind the glass partition leaned forward, zooming in, sensing that rare thing, viral gold unfolding live. The gallery, packed with spectators who'd come for mundane small claims drama, sat frozen, mouths half open. Someone's phone rose slowly, red recording light blinking. The defendant, a middle-aged woman clutching a folder of evidence, shrank back in her chair, eyes wide with disbelief. Karen's hands sliced through the air, her jewelry catching the overhead lights with each violent gesture. Her voice cracked on the high notes, words tumbling over each other in a cascade of righteous fury. The air itself felt thicker, charged with the electricity of impending collision. Every person in that room knew what was coming, except Karen. But she made one catastrophic mistake. She forgot who sat behind that bench. Judge Judy Files, 70-something years of compressed legal authority wrapped in a black robe, hadn't moved. Not an inch. Her gavel rested on the wood before her, untouched. Her reading glasses perched on her nose, magnifying eyes that had seen 10,000 tantrums just like this one. Those eyes, sharp as glass shards, cold as January steel, locked onto Karen with the precision of a laser sight. The judge's expression didn't shift. No eyebrow raise. No tight-lipped disapproval. Just that unblinking, calculating stare that had made careers and destroyed egos for 3 decades on television. Her fingers, adorned with simple rings, remained folded on the desk, patient as a predator watching prey exhaust itself. The courtroom's air conditioning hummed softly, the only sound beneath Karen's escalating tirade. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her stenotype machine, frozen mid-keystroke. The producer in the control room whispered into his headset, "Hold all cameras on Judy, don't you dare cut away." What happened in the next 10 seconds would become legendary. It would be clipped, shared, remixed, and replayed across every social media platform. It would spawn 1,000 think pieces about respect, authority, and consequences. But in that moment, as Karen's voice reached its crescendo and Judge Judy's silence stretched like a tightening wire, nobody knew they were witnessing the birth of a viral reckoning. The gavel hadn't moved yet, but it would. On paper, it looked like a standard case. Property line dispute between neighbors, $1,200 in damages, 2 women who couldn't stand each other, the kind of petty conflict Judge Judy's show thrived on. Small stakes, big emotions, clear-cut resolution within 22 minutes. The paperwork sat neatly stacked on the bench, Karen's complaint, the defendant's counterclaim, photographs of the allegedly damaged fence, receipts for repairs. But the moment Karen walked through those courtroom doors, the temperature shifted. She entered with her shoulders squared, chin raised at an angle that screamed defiance. Her purse, oversized designer knockoff, swung from her elbow like a weapon. She didn't walk to the plaintiff's podium. She marched, heels clicking against the polished floor with military precision. Before the bailiff even finished announcing the case number, Karen was already sighing loud enough for the microphones to catch it, arms crossing over her chest like battle armor. The defendant, a soft-spoken woman named Lisa, stood quietly at her podium. Her folder of evidence sat closed in front of her, tabs color-coded and organized. She wore a modest blouse, hands folded, eyes occasionally flicking toward Karen with visible apprehension. Lisa had brought documentation, time-stamped text messages, contractor estimates, photographs with metadata intact. She'd prepared like someone expecting a fair hearing. Karen had brought attitude. Judge Judy began with her standard opening, reading the case summary aloud. Karen's eyes rolled skyward before the judge even finished the first sentence. A theatrical exhale escaped her lips. Her foot tapped impatiently against the podium base, the sound rhythmic and intentional. When Judge Judy asked Lisa to present her side first, Karen's scoff echoed through the studio. Lisa started speaking, her voice steady but quiet. She explained the property boundary, showed a survey map, pointed to the section where Karen's contractor had allegedly crossed onto her land and damaged existing fencing. Every few sentences, Karen would interrupt with sounds, sharp intakes of breath, derisive snorts, muttered words just below the threshold of direct contempt. "That's ridiculous," Karen hissed under her breath, loud enough to be heard. Lisa paused, glancing at the judge. Judge Judy's eyes remained fixed on the defendant, but her peripheral vision tracked every one of Karen's microaggressions. The judge had seen this dance before. The performative disbelief, the theatrical victimhood, the entitled assumption that volume would triumph over evidence. Lisa continued, now presenting photographs. The images showed fresh fence posts driven into ground that clearly belonged on her property. Karen shook her head violently, jewelry jangling. Her lips moved in silent disagreement, forming words the cameras caught but couldn't quite hear. From the moment she sat down, the courtroom felt smaller, the air thicker with compressed hostility. Judge Judy sat back slightly, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Her expression remained unreadable. Not angry, not amused, not even particularly interested. Just watching, calculating, letting the rope unspool. She'd refined this strategy over 30 years and 15,000 cases. Give them enough space to reveal themselves. Let the entitled dig their own graves with golden shovels. Lisa finished her opening statement, placed her evidence on the podium, and stepped back. Her hands trembled slightly, not from dishonesty, but from the psychological warfare Karen had waged through body language alone. Judge Judy's eyes shifted finally, landing on Karen with the weight of a closing door. "All right," the judge said, her voice even and controlled. "Your turn." Karen's spine straightened. Her moment had arrived, the spotlight she'd been elbowing toward since she walked in. This was her vindication, her platform, her chance to expose the injustice she'd suffered. She opened her mouth, and that's when everything started unraveling. Karen didn't just speak. She launched. Her voice filled the courtroom with the force of someone who'd been holding back dam water and finally let it loose. Words tumbled over each other. Accusations, grievances, a litany of wrongs committed against her by this neighbor, by contractors, by the world itself. Her hands moved in wild arcs, punctuating every syllable with physical emphasis. Judge Judy's hand rose slightly, a subtle gesture, palm facing Karen. "Ma'am, slow down. One issue at a time." Karen barely paused for breath. She plowed forward, pivoting from the fence to property taxes to some incident involving a dog from 3 years ago. Her face deepened from pink to red, veins becoming visible along her temple. The folder she'd brought, thin, disorganized, sat ignored on the podium. She didn't need evidence. She had conviction. Lisa stood at her podium, stunned into stillness. This wasn't a legal argument. This was performance art painted in rage. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her voice sharpening by a single degree. "Ma'am, answer the question I asked. Did you authorize your contractor to work on her property?" Karen's eyes snapped to the judge, and for a split second, something dangerous flickered there. The realization that she was being interrupted, corrected, challenged. "I authorized him to fix my fence." Karen's voice spiked, the word "my" hitting like a hammer. "If her property got in the way, that's not my problem." The gallery shifted. A collective intake of breath rippled through the spectators. The bailiff's posture straightened incrementally. Even the camera operators exchanged glances through the glass partition. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. "So you admit he crossed the property line?" "I admit nothing." Karen's voice cracked upward. "This whole thing is a setup. She's been harassing me for years, and now she comes in here with her fake documents." "Fake documents?" Judge Judy's eyebrow finally moved 1 millimeter north. "You're accusing her of forgery?" Karen's hands slammed onto the podium, not violently but loud enough that the microphone caught it as a sharp thud. "I'm saying she's a liar." The courtroom temperature dropped 10 degrees. Lisa flinched at her podium, physically recoiling from the accusation. Her mouth opened to defend herself, but Judge Judy's hand rose again, this time toward Lisa. A silent command. "Let her continue." "Let her dig." Karen sensed momentum, mistook the judge's silence for permission. Her voice climbed higher, faster, a runaway train picking up speed on a downhill track. She jabbed her finger toward Lisa, then toward the evidence photos, then toward the ceiling, as if appealing to a higher authority than the woman in the black robe. "She called the police on me. She complained to the HOA. She measured my fence posts with a tape measure at 6 in the morning." "Ma'am." Judge Judy's voice cut through like a scalpel. "Stay on topic." But Karen was past hearing. The pressure cooker had reached critical mass and the valve was blown. Her words became a stream of consciousness assault, past grievances, perceived slights, a conspiracy theory involving the entire neighborhood. Her face glistened under the studio lights, sweat beading along her hairline. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, a movement so deliberate it seemed choreographed. Her fingers returned to their steepled position. Her eyes never left Karen's face, tracking every micro-expression, every tell, every self-incriminating statement. You could see it building, the fuse burning down, sparks trailing behind it, everyone in the room knowing exactly where it led. And another thing, Karen's voice hit a new register, shrill enough that the sound technician in the booth winced and adjusted levels. "I'm tired of being disrespected. I'm tired of people like her thinking they can—" "Sit down," Judge Judy said quietly. Karen froze, not because she obeyed, but because she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. "Excuse me?" Judge Judy's gaze intensified, cold and absolute. "I said sit down." Karen's mouth fell open, then closed, then opened again. "I'm not finished." The words erupted from her like magma, and that's when she made the fatal error. She raised her voice at the judge. The explosion was instant and total. "I don't care what you think." Karen's voice shattered every pretense of courtroom decorum, reverberating off the walls like thunder trapped in a box. "This is my case. I have a right to speak." Her arms flailed above her head, Fingers splayed wide as if trying to grab justice from the air itself. Her face had gone from crimson to purple, a vein pulsing visibly at her temple. Spittle flew with her consonants. The folder on her podium toppled over, papers scattering across the floor. Ignored, irrelevant to the hurricane she'd become. The gallery gasped collectively, hands flying to mouths. Someone's phone camera captured every second. The red recording light unwavering. The bailiff took 2 steps forward, his hand hovering near his radio, eyes locked on Karen's movements. Lisa stood frozen at her podium, face drained of color, gripping the edges as if the wood might somehow protect her from the verbal shrapnel. The court reporter's fingers stopped moving entirely. Even she, trained to capture every word in the most chaotic proceedings, sat stunned by the magnitude of the disrespect unfolding before her. But Judge Judy didn't move. Not a muscle. Not a breath. Her face remained carved from stone, those sharp eyes fixed on Karen with the intensity of a hawk watching a rabbit exhaust itself in an open field. Her hand stayed folded on the bench. Her gavel sat inches from her right hand, untouched, patient, waiting for its moment. She let Karen scream. Let her burn through the oxygen in her lungs. Let her reveal exactly who she was to every camera, every spectator, every person who would watch this moment replayed 1,000,000 times across the internet. Karen's tirade continued. Words spilling out in a toxic flood. Accusations about the legal system, about being silenced, about her rights, about respect she was owed simply for existing. Her jewelry rattled with every gesture. Her heels shifted against the floor, her entire body a weapon of theatrical indignation. I am a taxpayer. I demand to be heard. The courtroom wasn't silent anymore. It was a war zone with one combatant, fighting ghosts, windmills, and her own crumbling credibility. Then, in the eye of Karen's hurricane, Judge Judy moved. Her right hand rose slowly, deliberately, and closed around the gavel's handle. The wooden instrument lifted 6 inches off the bench. Every eye in the room tracked its arc. One sharp crack split the air. The sound detonated like a gunshot in the confined space. Karen's mouth froze mid-word, her lips still forming a syllable that would never escape. Her eyes went wide, pupils dilating with the sudden realization that she'd crossed a line drawn in permanent ink. The gavel's echo faded into absolute silence. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to a register so low the microphones barely caught it. But every person in that courtroom heard it in their bones. Ma'am, sit down. 3 words, delivered with the force of a judicial sledgehammer. Karen's legs trembled. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. But she didn't sit, couldn't sit. Pride and shock had welded her feet to the floor. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed to razors. You walk into my courtroom, the judge continued, each word precisely measured. A surgeon making incisions. Disrespect my authority, interrupt my proceedings, and scream like a toddler who dropped their pacifier. The gallery sat paralyzed. Lisa's hand covered her mouth. The bailiff's eyes widened slightly. Even he hadn't heard Judge Judy drop the hammer quite like this. Let me make something crystal clear. Judge Judy's voice remained low, controlled, more terrifying than any shout could ever be. I don't care how loud you yell. Volume doesn't equal validity. And right now you've just proven you have neither case nor composure. Karen's face drained from purple to ash white in seconds. Her hand, still raised from her last gesture, slowly lowered to her sides. Judge Judy sat back, her expression settling into something colder than contempt, indifference laced with finality. Case dismissed. In the defendant's favor. Costs and damages to be paid by the plaintiff. The gavel struck again, once, final. The sound of a door slamming shut on Karen's entire argument. Get out of my courtroom. Karen's body moved on autopilot, muscles operating independently from her shattered mind. Her hand fumbled for her purse, fingers trembling so violently the strap slipped twice before she managed to hook it over her shoulder. Papers still scattered across the floor at her feet. The evidence she'd never presented, arguments she'd never made, lay abandoned like casualties of war. She turned toward the exit, her movements jerky and uncertain. The confident march that had carried her into the courtroom had evaporated. Now her shoulders hunched forward, her head dropped, eyes fixed on the ground as if the floor might swallow her whole and end this nightmare. Each step felt heavier than the last. The bailiff stood near the door, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes tracked her exit with the wariness of someone watching a defeated animal. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His presence was simply procedural now, making sure she left without further incident. The gallery remained frozen in tableau, spectators caught between shock and satisfaction. Someone's phone was still recording, capturing every frame of Karen's walk of shame. Another spectator leaned toward her neighbor, whispering behind her hand, words lost but intention clear. the shared knowledge that they'd just witnessed something extraordinary, a reckoning delivered in real time. Karen reached the courtroom door and pushed through without looking back. The heavy wood swung shut behind her with a muted thud, severing her from the scene of her public dismantling. Through the small window in the door, her silhouette could be seen moving quickly down the hallway, fleeing toward the parking lot and whatever remained of her dignity. Inside the courtroom, life resumed. Lisa exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her entire body sagging with relief. Her hands, which had been gripping the podium edge with white-knuckled intensity, slowly relaxed. Her eyes glistened, not with tears of sadness, but the kind that come when pressure finally releases. Judge Judy glanced toward Lisa, her expression softening by a microscopic degree. "Next time," the judge said, her voice returning to its normal register, "bring a witness who saw the property damage occur. Documentation is good. Eyewitness testimony is better. You won't need to fight this hard." Lisa nodded rapidly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Your Honor, thank you so much." Judge Judy waved her hand dismissively, not rudely, but in the manner of someone who'd just done what she did every day. Delivered justice. Held the line. Refused to let volume overcome evidence. Next case. The judge called toward the producer's booth. The court reporter's fingers returned to her stenotype, the familiar clicking rhythm resuming. The gallery buzzed with renewed energy, spectators already crafting the stories they'd tell later. "You won't believe what I just saw in Judge Judy's courtroom." But the real aftermath was already unfolding beyond those walls. The video clip hit social media before Karen even reached her car. Someone in the gallery had uploaded it within seconds of the gavel's final strike. The algorithm god smiled upon it immediately. Controversy, justice, a clear villain, a satisfying resolution. Everything the internet craved in 90 seconds of compressed drama. Within an hour, the view count hit 6 figures. Within 3 hours, it crossed 1 million. The comment section flooded like a breached dam. "This is why we love Judge Judy." Karen got wrecked. The silence after that gavel drop was everything. Volume doesn't equal validity. I'm stealing that line, news aggregator sites picked it up. Reaction channels dissected every frame. Someone created a remix with dramatic music swelling under Judge Judy's verbal takedown. Karen's face, frozen in that moment of realization when the gavel struck, became a meme template. When you realize you messed with the wrong one. By the next morning, Karen was famous for all the wrong reasons. The courtroom meltdown she thought would prove her point instead proved Judge Judy's. Volume is not victory. Rage is not righteousness. And authority earned through decades of dispensing justice doesn't bend to tantrums, no matter how loud they get. Karen walked in believing her outrage was her power. She left knowing the difference between noise and truth. This wasn't just about a property dispute over a fence line. This wasn't even about $1,200 in damages or a contractor who crossed a boundary. This was about what happens when entitlement collides with authority.